Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. It's official. After weeks of following Miss Supranational 2026, from the arrivals of the candidates to the interviews, preliminary competitions, hanggang sa coronation night, we finally have our queen. And congratulations to our Miss Supranational 2026, our very own Katrina Legado of the Philippines. And as a Filipino, syempre nakaka-proud talaga, right? Hindi araw-araw may pagkakataon tayong makita ang isang kababayan na nananalo sa isang malaking international pageant, right? So, Katrina, you represented the Philippines beautifully. And before we look into Katrina's performance, let's take a look at the official results because I think this year's top five was actually very strong. So we have, of course, our Miss Supranational 2026 Philippines, Katrina Llegado. And our first runner-up is France, Eve Gilles. Second runner-up is Brazil's Lara Marina. Third runner-up is Nigeria's Inda Ino. I hope I said that correctly. And then, of course, fourth runner-up is Miss Czech Republic, Karolina Gurailova. So, what was my first reaction? I was actually just content and very happy, not just because Philippines won, but because I really felt this top five represented strongest in the competition. Of course, looking at the 32 hot picks on that final week, there are some here and there that I'm like, what happened to Miss Indonesia, right? And I was expecting Miss Czech Republic to be safe on the top two. But again, it is pageantry, my friends. My biggest surprise wasn't Katrina winning because I actually thought she had very realistic chance, especially during the last few days of the competition. You could feel her confidence kept growing every time she stepped on that stage, right? Even after she didn't win the Supra model for the region. And I cannot believe how many Filipinos have said their comments online and saying things like, oh, she had 1 year to prepare for that. And I was thinking to myself, my gosh, that is just an aspect of the competition. That's not really the actual Miss Supranational 2026. But then again, everybody's entitled to their opinions and everybody's entitled to their comments. Okay. For me, my biggest surprise was actually Miss Indonesia. And I'm also a fan of Miss Indonesia. Indonesia had been one of the most consistent names in almost every hot picks and prediction list throughout the competition. From start to finish, every time a new ranking came out, she was almost always there, sometimes at the very top. And so when she didn't make it to the top five, I have to admit I was surprised. But that's the reality of pageantry, like we said. Prediction lists are always fun and I enjoy following them as much as everybody else, but they're never official scorecards. Coronation night is a completely different ballgame, and we know that. Now, I know there has already been some discussion online about Indonesia's result, and I have quite a few thoughts about it, but I don't want to take the focus away from Katrina's victory in this video. So we'll save that for another conversation, hopefully by tonight or by tomorrow, because I think it deserves its own episode or its own discussion. As for the final order of the runner-ups, so happy again, Eve Gilles is first runner-up. We'll talk about her very shortly. Nigeria delivered when it mattered most, and that's exactly what finals night is all about. Brazil and Miss Czech Republic also continued their country's tradition of performing at beauty pageants. Those two countries are consistently competitive, and this year was no different. So overall, I think this was a very deserving top five. And before we continue with Katrina, I was thinking it's probably fair to spend a little time talking about the other women who completed this year's top five. And let's start with Miss France. I have to admit, I was smiling all the way when Eve Gilles was announced as first runner-up. Okay, if you've been with me from last year's competitions and of course this year, you already know that she's always been one of my favorites. Not because she's Miss France, okay, but because I really admired her story. She's someone who has been very open about living with paroxysmal dyskinesia, and instead of that diagnosis letting it define her, she turned it as part of her advocacy. At bilang nurse, I always appreciate when contestants use their platform to help educate and inspire, and she's done exactly that. And on stage, she was very elegant from beginning to end. Her styling was very polished. Her communication was very confident. And she always carried herself with so much grace. Was I hoping she might win? Honestly, yes. In fact, when I was talking about the dark horses on my last video, and I said, if we are to crown someone, aside from in my head, aside from Katrina, for me, I would crown Miss France. So I was really, really happy. And of course, she does not know me, but I'm so incredibly proud of her. Okay, then now, of course, we have Brazil. At this point, I don't think anyone is ever surprised anymore whenever Brazil makes it to top five. They know exactly how to prepare their contestants. Lara Marina looked incredibly comfortable throughout the competition. She had that effortless confidence that makes you enjoy watching her on stage. She never looked rushed, she never looked uncomfortable, and every appearance, like I said, looks very elegant. Brazil has this strong reputation in beauty pageantry over the years, and Lara definitely continued that tradition. Now, let's talk about Miss Nigeria. And I have to be honest, this was probably a little bit of a surprise for me. It's not because she didn't deserve to be on the top five. Far, far, far from it, my friends. I just didn't think that many prediction lists had Nigeria finishing very high. I saw one on the 32 hot picks that I reviewed, but that's exactly why you never rely too much on fan rankings. Okay, when actual judging starts, everything changes. And the judges aren't looking at YouTube predictions or Instagram or Facebook polls, right? They are looking at the person standing in front of them. And clearly, in that, I hope I said her name correctly, impressed the judges enough to earn place in top three. Very happy for her. And sometimes a contestant saves her strongest performance for the biggest stage. And I think that's exactly what happened here. And finally, Miss Czech Republic. If you followed Miss Supranational for several years, you know this country is almost always in the conversation. And again, they consistently send delegates who are well trained, elegant, and very competitive. Carolina Gorilova continued that legacy for Czech Republic. I thought she was one of the most favorite. And I thought, based on the data that we looked, I thought she was very safe on the top two. Okay. But again, she stayed consistent throughout the competition. And consistency is something this organization has always rewarded. And looking at this entire top five, one thing really stands out for me. Each contestant brought something very different, right? France brought elegance and authenticity. Brazil brought confidence and polished performance. Nigeria brought momentum and really surprised a lot of people on the finals night. Czech Republic brought consistency and experience. And there was our Philippine pride, Katrina. She didn't have to be the loudest contestant in the room, but she simply kept getting stronger every day, right? And I think that's what ultimately separated her from everybody else. Because if you look back at her journey from the beginning of the competition until coronation night, you'll notice something very interesting, and that she didn't just maintain her level, but she kept improving. And that exactly what won the crown. Para sa akin, yung kay Katrina, she didn't just impress people with just one single performance or isang interview. It wasn't just one gown, right? Or just wasn't one walk. It was the fact that if you watch the entire competition from day one until coronation night, you could actually say that she was growing into that role. And I think that's something a lot of people overlook. Tapos yung mga fans, we get so focused on who's leading the prediction and who's winning this side contest that they have that we forgot that the actual big competition is still happening. So the judges are just not deciding after the preliminaries. Again, they are watching these delegates every day. Every appearance matters. Yung mga interview nila, yung rehearsals, yung interaction nila. And I felt like on this journey for Katrina, she had the consistency. Hindi siya yung contestant na isang araw sobrang taas ng performance tapos kinabukasan nawawala siya sa radar, right? She stayed steady, and every time she appeared, she looked so prepared, and she walked on the stage, she looked comfortable. And every interview that I watched so far, she came across very genuine. As the competition went on, I also noticed yung confidence niya. Makikita mo talaga. During the first few days, she was already doing well. But by the time we reached that final week last week, she looked like someone who truly believed she belonged there. That makes a huge difference because confidence is very contagious. And when a contestant believes in herself, the audience feels it, the judges feels it, and every other contestants notice it too. And I appreciated that Katrina was never one to look like she was trying to copy anyone else's style. Hindi siya yung mukhang may role na ginagampanan. She looked very comfortable being herself, and authenticity is becoming more and more important in beauty pageants like this. So they're not just looking at photographs, they are looking for someone again to represent that organization because that is important. Someone who can speak to the media, someone who can connect with people from different cultures. And I've seen her connecting and being very engaged with other candidates. And she looked, again, komportable siya, very comfortable with all of the rest of the delegates. So watching her throughout the competition, I could honestly picture her doing that. She has that calm presence. She's very elegant but approachable. She is confident but never overwhelming. And those qualities don't always go viral on social media, but I think people and the pageantry, especially within that supranational organization, they do appreciate that. Organizations like Miss Supranational wants a candidate that is able to represent the company long after the coronation night when the confetti has been swept off the stage. So we would like to congratulate all of the other contestants who represented their countries this year. Of course, one person goes home with the big crown, but we know every delegate has spent months and sometimes years preparing for opportunities like this. And alam natin na behind every evening gown, behind every photo shoot and smile on stage are countless hours of training and sacrifice, right? Maybe months of being away from their families, yung hard work that we don't ever get to see, right? So as pageant fans, it's okay to have favorites. And, believe me, I definitely had mine and I said it already. I was very happy to see if Gilles finish as the first runner up because she's been, again, one of those contestants that I've enjoyed since the started pageantry. And Brazil, like we said, once again proved why it's one of the strongest pageant countries in the world. Nigeria, for me, had one of the biggest breakthrough performances of the competition, and Czech Republic continued its incredible consistency at this beauty pageant. But the night belonged to Katrina, and she represented us, the Philippines, with such elegance and humility and quiet confidence. And she stayed, again, consistent all the way to coronation night. And when her name was finally announced, it honestly felt like the perfect ending to the journey. And as a Filipino, this is definitely a moment to celebrate, not just because she's coming home with another crown, but Katrina showed that preparation speaks louder than hype, that consistency beats predictions, and that sometimes the person who keeps getting better every single day is the one standing in the center of the stage at the very end. So, congratulations once again to our Miss Supranational 2026, Katrina Legado of the Philippines. And I'd love to hear what you all think. Were you all happy with the final results? Did the judges get the top five right, my friends? And if you've been on the judging panel, would your winner have been the same? Or would you have crowned someone else? So let's continue the conversation in the comments, mga kaibigan. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe and share it with your fellow pageant fans. And thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Thank you. Bye-bye.